Gauguin in 19th-century Paris, a teenage boy living in Australia today with a passion for skateboarding was trying to navigate the demands of his friends, casual racism and family obligations. And also, given recent events, very poignant, an elderly woman in a nursing home trying to understand why her family aren't coming to visit, but are waving to her from the footpath. And these are just 3 examples. The breadth of the Burnished Sun is truly astonishing. Each and every story in this collection has that gut punch of truth and recognition where you realise, oh so subtly, you are starting to experience the world through another's eyes and be suffused with empathy. The ability is the mark of a true writer. I envy all the readers in the room tonight who are about to discover the gems in this collection for the first time. So congratulations, Mirandi. We are you. UQP is so proud to be your publisher.
That's the sound of COVID safety. Thanks so much, Lou. Now I'd like to introduce Fiona Stager, who has been a bookseller for a millennia and is the co-owner of Avid Reader. She has been a judge for many literary awards and also for cake making. Yep. And she's also a previous president of the Australian Booksellers Association, which she was president of for many years. So everybody please welcome Fiona. And of course, with Fiona, we have the wonderful Mirandi Riwoe, who is the author of the novella The Fish Girl and Stone Sky Gold Mountain, which won the 2020 Queensland Literary Award for Fiction and the inaugural ARA Historical Novel Prize, and was shortlisted for the 2021 Stella Prize and longlisted for the 2021 Miles Franklin Literary Award. Her work has appeared in Best Australian Stories, Meanjin, Review of Australian Fiction, Griffith Review, and Best Summer Stories. Mirandi has a PhD in creative writing and literary studies and lives here. We are all so grateful that she does. Welcome, Mirandi.
Thank you so much, Chrissy. And thank you for putting in the fact that I'm a cake judge in my bio. I was at an art exhibition sometime last year and I got introduced to someone and they said, oh yes, I know who you are. You were the cake judge at the West End State School Play. I have made it. I want to be remembered. Thank you all for joining us. This is going to be a great pleasure. I think we're all going to really enjoy hearing more about Mirandi's beautiful collection. So congratulations, Miranda. The Burnished supports the reader across times, countries and suburbs, just like Aviva spoke so beautifully about. So you write confidently across genres. Which comes first, the idea of a story, genre or format?
Oh, I would say the idea first. It used to be format. So when I was writing crime fiction, I was definitely sort of pigeonholing things into format. And I was talking just today about how fiction, so I have ideas that I like to write about to do with, I guess, feminism, motherhood, racism, whatever. And I think fiction of any sort is a really good vehicle to sort of share some ideas, like and sort of sneak them in. And historical fiction is good for that too. But no, usually, especially in the short fiction here and the novellas, usually it's the idea first and then and then I usually spend a lot of time like layering my thoughts just in the notes before I know how I'm going to write it even. Yeah.
And when do you know it's the right kind of format or length, whether it's a short story or a novella or a novel?
I think usually you kind of know just with, say with The Fish Girl, it was, because it was just the one character, it was taken from a short story anyway, the idea and the arcing of it. And actually when I wrote it, it was going to be any length that it just happened to turn into, happened to be a novella length. And then I guess it's to do with the ideas and how many layers you have to the story. Like obviously, in my books, there are a few characters, you're following a few characters, you're following, you know, a few lines of action, whereas in a short story, usually it's more succinct. It's about the one character and how they're sort of responding to the world. And unless I mean, a lot of times for short stories too, there's a word length you're given, whether it's for a competition or for a journal. So you're kind of like honing it down into that word length as well for short fiction.
As a reader, I'm just endlessly fascinated with the craft. And just in terms of characters, when do they come into you? Are you one of those authors where a character comes fully formed, or do you get to know the character along with the reader?
Yeah, no, I think you've always got, you know, your initial idea of who the character might be. But like I was saying, like in a notebook, I'll start layering, like, oh, she'd say this, or, you know, or he'd do this, or, oh, you know, that happened. You know, I'll just sort of start building up that character for myself before. And a lot of it, as most writers would know, a lot of it you don't use. You just sort of know that it's helping you sort of piece together your character and the story. Yeah.
And just in terms of how the collection is put together, so Laura Alfrey, who's also very fine, award-winning short story writer. I think, does she have the COVID? She might have the COVID.
Hello, Laura. She's just waving at us.
Hello, Laura. And so you've dedicated the book to Laura, and I think it was at one of the events we did with her that she said, and I've always remembered it, she said that in terms of a collection of short stories and novellas, that each piece in a collection has to speak to each other. So how did you and the publisher, oh no, so it's much fun. So how did you and Aviva go about putting the book together?
I guess first of all, we looked at, you know, if the stories were still relevant, you know, out of all the stories I've written, you know, and of the same, I guess, quality. But also, I would probably argue that most of my stories speak to each other anyway, because I wrote them and I am interested in certain things, you know, like I was saying before, I'm interested in women, maybe certainly maybe discrimination, you know, to do with the younger people in my stories. So I think maybe it's to do with, so they all kind of link up in that I wrote them, I guess. Yeah.
But I think it's that, where do you put them together in a book? Like how, like you've bookended it with two novellas, but then how do you choose the stories in the middle and the order that they come in?
So usually there's a bit of a shuffle with that sort of thing. I think with anybody who's had a short story collection, usually you're shuffling them around a bit because you don't, you know, some characters might be alike. Or I've also got historical, so I've got most of the short stories contemporary, but a few are historical as well. So you're trying not to bunch them all together. You're trying to get some young people against the older people. So, you know, maybe, you know, a woman character compared to the boy, and you're sort of shuffling around constantly to try and get the right flow, I guess. But then I was listening to somebody the other day and they were saying, you know, a lot of people who read short fiction anyway, you know, and I'm one of them actually. I just open up to different stories.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I do.
You don't read it from the beginning.
No, especially if one's super long and I just don't want to go through a super long one first, just in case I don't want to hit myself off. I start with a shorter one or one that's been highly commended already. I'll start on that one.
Oh, yes, this is so controversial. Who else in the audience and on Zoom picks up the collection and reads randomly? Oh my God. As a bookseller, I am shocked.
After all that work, we just put it together the right way.
I think it's really interesting. I never thought of that, didn't you?
Yes.
So pure. That's right. You live and you learn. Now, how does like we talked about the stories within this book speaking to each other. So how does this book speak to your other work?
Oh, well, I guess again, a lot of it is, so some of it is historical fiction and which I kind of just fell into when I was writing crime fiction. I wasn't a huge. I didn't go into thinking of historical writer. Like I love historical fiction. That's what I'm going to write. I just kind of fell into it, and then the research comes and everything. I would say anybody who has enjoyed my other fiction will enjoy this because it's the same. Maybe I'm exploring the same things to do with, more women and discrimination a lot of the time. But, and I guess, you know what it is? All this, like the short fiction, I know there's a lot of short fiction writers who write, they just sit down and write a short story. I'm very much like all of these stories have come from something. So they've been written over a period. Like I've been building them up, like something might happen in my life. And then I go away and think about it, and then I'll add to that, and I go, well, what about if she lost a child? And so I sort of build on it. So I don't sit down and think, I'm going to write a short story. And actually in that sort of process, I'm also working out whether it's enough for a book or not too. Because then it'll be like, well, oh no, actually I've got this other character that work that one, and I'll put that into a novel one day. So it's sort of just all works out. But at the time, like say the one we are going to talk about later, the skater one, well that, some of that stuff happened in my life at that time. So then, and I get a bee in my bonnet and I go write about it, in short fiction. That's not a question.
Yeah, that segues beautifully to my next question. So in Burnished Sun, so both the novellas and some of the stories have characters who would have been traditionally as exotic.
Yeah.
And you're giving them a voice and a name. So why choose to inhabit characters whose lives are overlooked, dismissed, ignored, and abused?
Yeah, well, with the Fish Girl, I was thinking just later because I was reading that Felicity Plunkett wrote a review about books about what's her name? The poet, Sylvia Plath. Thank you. So she was writing about like biographies, how actually, they're giving this voice to her, which are probably inaccurate. It's unfair to do. It was a really great essay. And I was thinking too about like how I used to always say, oh, I'm giving her a voice, like say Nina from the Fish Girl or Anna the Javanese. The thing is with the Fish Girl, she was in a short story, so fictional. But I would suggest that, well, Somerset Maugham also wrote a lot about things that he actually saw. But also I would argue that her predicament, women still today live with that predicament. So I think, so I guess Nina for me was like, could be anyone. Whereas giving voice, so now I pause and I think of like, well, I'm not giving Anna the Javanese voice. What I'm trying to show is a different context, like, because all we know about Anna the Javanese, who was Paul Gauguin's mistress and muse at one stage, not a muse, but model. So all we have about her are a few photos and a painting and what other white male artists of the time said about her, and just the sort of the words they said about her or how they, she was sort of packaged in this exotic kind of, persona. So all I'm trying to do is not so much give her a voice because Anna the Javanese was a real person. She probably has real great grandkids, that sort of thing. What I'm trying to do is just show her story from another perspective, like that might actually be closer to the truth, given what we know now and how history is sort of has been handed down to us by, like certain people, and that's and a lot of the time you don't question it, whereas I think with my fiction, at least I get to question it, and then I can maybe, or explore it at least, and maybe my readers can sort of go, oh, I think of it like that too, like this. And also say with the Fish Girl, of course, the impetus with that one and some of the stories is, of course, because I'm Eurasian, and just that disdain for Asian women or Eurasian women back in the day. Of course, it's going to get my back up, So yeah, that's where that comes from.
So we've got the two novellas that Bookended, which are the historical fiction ones. So what kind of research do you do? And because you also, your previous novel is also based in the gold rush era of North Queensland. So how do you come to the issue of research? How do you do your research?
Luckily with my PhD I did a lot of research, so I sort of became, and also because it was set in the Victorian period, I got to, I had a good grounding in that Victorian period anyway, so that would help me out. But same with Annah the Javanese, so I had it took me a while to get into actually telling the story. I didn't know how I was going to do it. And so there was all this information on her, like she was, like she had the pet monkey and that she was exotic and that she cleaned out Gauguin, like he broke his ankle, I think, and she cleaned him out, all these things that we learn. And that she was with an opera singer, I think, first, and she was like, they just found her in the middle of Paris with a sign on her saying from Java. And she was just sort of handed over as a servant to Gauguin, you know, like just handed around. And I remember saying to Papa, like, how did she even get there? This is like the 1880s. Like, how did she even get there? You know, and it's the same as now, trafficked, you know. And also then I also showed Papa and other people from Java, like, because she was called Annah the Javanese, but actually if you look at her photos, she looks like actually she's from, which is part of Java, but from Ambon, so not so much the sort of eastern Java, but maybe from Ambon, just with her features and her hair. So I guess I sort of gave her that and another name. And also, you know, because I was saying she was passed around, I mean, she didn't have an income, and when she wanted to escape Gauguin, what else is she going to do but clean him out? You know what I mean? Like, there's just things like that you just sort of like, so I found all that stuff in research, and I read a lot by Gauguin himself, like letters and things. Delightful fellow. And but he does say at one stage, he says something like, everything must be sacrificed to colour. And I thought, well, that's my in. That's my in. So when I wrote it, my in was that, I guess, colour, like when she's first discarded, you know, everything's dark and black and it just goes on from there. Yeah.
So is most of your research through books or online or?
A bit of both. I have to say, I love a bit of travel research. So for the Gold Rush one, I went up to North Queensland, I went all around, you know, where the Palmer River and everything. And like the book I'm working on now, after this one, like I was really actually starting it because I couldn't get to travel during COVID to do my research, you know, in Indonesia and Holland and that. So I do love a bit of travel as well as the research, but with her, I have been to Paris. I thought, you know, that was kind of lucky. But with her, it was mostly internet where you can see photos of her and stuff. And also, so it was inspired by my beautiful artist cousin. And she just said to me one day, she goes, oh, you know, Mirandi, Gauguin had a Javanese model. And I was like, what? And then I went away and did my research, and she gave me a couple of big books because, like I said, she's an artist, so she gave me a couple of big books just on Gauguin. And then, yeah, I guess just looking through libraries for like letters. And then actually there was another part too with one of his paintings is based on, I think, Manet or Monet. I think I put that because I wrote it. But anyway, and I came across this fascinating, I came across so much fascinating stuff. I came across this really fascinating thesis that somebody else did in America. Oh, no. First, that was another thing. I found this really, an art book that was criticising how they used, I guess, foreign or black figures in art. And it just kind of mentioned, I think, Monet or Manet's work with the woman who's lying back, she's naked. And then Gauguin, I think it's Manet. And then Gauguin did his own painting with one of his one of the women from Tahiti. And so I got to explore in my fiction like what they're saying in that art book. So it was just really, really fascinating.
Yes, there's so much in it, and just in terms of identity. So you have these people in Paris in France who misunderstand and they call her a Negro, and then I think Gauguin thinks she's from Tahiti, or nobody quite understands.
No, and that was also with the age, I think, because they said she was 13, but I think in the photo she looks a bit older. This is all just my own, you know, like when I was trying to sort of put it together. But then, of course, his, I guess his mistresses was, you know, didn't word to use, but in Tahiti, they were like 13. So I think maybe there was some crossed wires, maybe she was a bit older. Also, I realised I was making her a bit older than 13 just for readers, just to let readers of the book to think this poor girl was only 13. Like there was so much to consider.
So that's an interesting thing about historical fiction and the research you do. You must just discard so much because the details are just perfect. They're enough for a reader to be there, to sense the place, to smell, to have, like you can almost feel the textiles. So how much do you discard?
Oh, a lot in all historical fiction. And I mean, we all know how painful it is when you read historical fiction and everything's there, like everything's in there, like itemized for you. So, but even like say Anna, what I came across in America was this thesis on what happened after she cleaned it out, you know, and it was to do with there's another character in the story or a person. And the thesis was that she left with him because they found some stuff in a box and blah, blah, blah. But it was just fascinating for me to know. And you could probably kind of guess what maybe happened to her, but then I didn't find anything after that, which is really frustrating.
That's a good chance for us to advertise that you are doing a historical fiction
I
writing
am.
workshop here at Abbott
I
Reader
am, on the 9th.
on the 9th of April. So
Next weekend, COVID willing. That's the new chant.
now, I know your mum, who I'm sure is on the Zoom. Hi, Meg. I know she's a big reader, and your dad is here in the audience. Papa, but I don't think Papa's talking to me because I got word on the 2 and he got word on the 5. So we were friends until I revealed this. But I'm interested in, I know Meg's
Anyone who got it in Tuesdays a witch.
I know Meg's a huge reader. So what part did books play in your life growing up?
Oh my God.
Mum and Dad.
So, actually, I was laughing to somebody today about the terrible things we used to read as teenagers, but no, Mum is, like, she's in this book club and they do a book a week, and then somebody's going to, like, present on the Monday. Like, she reads other stuff anyway, so she's amazing. And at the moment, she's writing a memoir. But yeah, no, we grew up with so many books. And actually, like I've said before, Mum's the one who got me into writing, I think, because she probably, you know, in our family, we just love books so much. I'm sure she always wanted to be a writer too. And she just took me aside like one day and said, stop talking about it, just get started, you know, which was just priceless. But yeah, so we were, she has this story, so this is how much she is. She has this story that my brother, so he was a little toddling around, and he used to bring her anything, even like the phone book, anything. So she would sit down so he could get on her lap and have a breastfeed. So he used to just like give her like the phone book, anything around, because he knew she would sit down and just start reading. But yeah, so books have always been like a huge part of our lives, and still, like, she's still like reading that much. I've slowed down, but she's amazing.
And when did you know that you wanted to be a writer? So you talked about your mum pulling you aside. When did you know?
I think it was always like I actually wanted to be an actress, but I think I always wanted to be a writer. Like, so Papa found, I don't know who I told this to. Papa found, like, when I was at 9, I started a book and I loved Nancy Drew, so it was a Tanya Chandler mystery, and it was called My Donovan Picture, and it was called The Invisible Pianist. Pianist, and with a picture of a piano, like, and so it was like a Nancy Drew. So that was around 9. It was all in like pencil and everything. So I obviously always wanted to be a writer. Yeah, but you talk about it. And you think one day, because you think it's easier than it is, you talk about it, but a lot of the times you don't get started on it. Yeah, so that was valuable that I just got started, because it's a long slog.
And when did you feel confident saying that I'm an author. When did you put that?
Yeah, that would be after being published. Yeah, definitely. And I know that, you know, if you write, you're a writer. I know that, but I know with me, I think even a friend pointed out, because we used to go a couple of times. We went to the Auburn Writers Festival together, and you know, and I remember her saying, like, one day you can put a writer there. And then when I did go to Auburn Writers Festival as a writer a couple of years ago, she texted me. She goes, "Oh, you've put writer on your passport now." Yeah, so that was really cute.
And as I said, I'm a reader, not a writer, but I'm endlessly fascinated in the actual practical art of writing. Like, where do you write? When do ideas come? Do you write at a desk? Do you wait for the muse? Do you sit and do a word count?
I don't think you can wait for the muse, because you'll be waiting a long time, I reckon, with the muse. Because you know what, any writer here will know, it's just hard work. Like every day, it's like, I'm going to do my 500 words. Like every day, it's hard work. Like it's like doing a workout. So what I try to do is, when I'm writing a novel, I try to do 500 words a day just to keep the momentum moving. But when I'm in the research process, it could be a year, and that's probably when I'm in between writing like short stories, anything that's sort of like happening in my life at the time, then that'll go into a short story while I'm sort of on the longer journey with the book. But I try the 500 words a day. I'm probably less, I think at first, like when you want to be published, you're still quite hungry, and you just like probably got your head down a lot more. Like, and I know when I started, it was with a master's actually, and I used to just work on the dining room table, but now I have my own little tiny, very messy room.
And any superstitions?
I don't think so, no. I don't think I don't think I'm listening. I'm not sitting there going, yeah.
Or rituals, superstitions or rituals around your writing?
No, I don't. Oh gosh, that's a good question.
You don't have to be wearing your lucky.
No, I'm not even like one that. No, I'm not even one of those people, like, you know how some writers, they don't want to talk about their next work, you know, like I will just tell you anything. And then hope you don't steal it. But no, I don't think I've got any no rituals. Sorry, Fiona, no, that's okay. That's income.
So if we go back to the Burnished Sun now, what does an almost middle-aged woman know so much about skating?
Because I'm a skateboarder. No, I have tried it and I can't stand one. So my son's a skateboarder. So he lives in Sydney, and so he's always skated, but now he's sponsored and everything. And Dave skates, not shoes and peril sometimes. And so when I wrote that, I knew. So that book, that story. Actually, I looked today too to see if Gina helped me out with this one, because I kept on. So there's this boy, and it was based on one of the first things. Like I was saying, I layer my ideas. So the first thing was this poor kid who was Maori, I think, and he was in Mount Rabat, and this old lady said to him, you know, what are you doing here? Your parents shouldn't be here. You should just go back to where you came from. And he shared it with no faces or anything. He just shared to show what he was facing in Mount Rabat, 5 years ago, which was annoying. Like, I'm just like, hold that. Anyway, so that's one aspect. And then my son at the same time was probably around the same age. He had African Australian friends, and they were trying to get on buses and the bus drivers and you can't, blah, blah, blah. So I made my character, my name's Chinese, and I kept asking my friend Gina, like, what does he call your dad? And I did look at my acknowledgements today. I'm sorry, Gina, I forgot to put you in there, but very, very important. And the goldfish is even in that story. Your dad's goldfish, that's got bigger and bigger. So that's what I mean. So I just sort of layer all my ideas, but he's a skateboarder, so. And he's shown, of course, I've seen a lot of footage of skateboarding. So I had some ideas, and he told me about a party too, where the police all turned up and tested them for alcohol, like it's called, and carted them away in paddy wagons because they were all like underage. So so all those things were sort of happening in my life at the time. So I sort of just a little together into the story. And then I got Dave and Jet, who thought it was hilarious, to check my tricks. And apparently I think I did get the trick wrong, but it's been fixed up. It's safe for any skater to read.
Because I think it's interesting for the reader. What I loved was that you went into these different worlds. So you started with Anna and Paris and Gauguin, and then suddenly you're moving beautifully through what is really a strong Brisbane landscape as well. I felt I was in the suburbs. And then it's bookended beautifully with The Fish Girl. So The Fish Girl was published in 2017, shortlisted for the Stella. What was it like revisiting that work after 5 years?
Yeah, it's really interesting. It was really interesting, just even the style it's written in. And I know at the time when I was writing it, so sometimes when I'm writing something like, say, The Fish Girl, I get, it sounds silly, but I get sort of a feeling like I just, so it's style different. I don't know how to explain it, but it'll come to me like, say, like music, like different. So the words will come out differently. So yeah, it was very interesting to go back to see. And I remember when I wrote The Fish Girl, because it's probably more, I guess the language maybe is a bit fancier than I normally would write. And I remember taking it to my writer's group, which is, with Emma and Laura and everyone. And I remember taking in bits, like handing in for the weekend and thinking, oh my God, I wonder if it'll get past them, you know? And then, and it did. So I realised I was maybe onto something back then. But yeah, it's interesting seeing it, but I am very familiar with it. And there's still lines in there that I still really love. So I do look back at it fondly. I look back at it fondly anyway, and that probably out of everything I've ever had published, I probably felt most passionately about having that published because I just wanted, she'd been relegated to, this short story that called her a hussy and a trollop, and I just felt really strongly that other people wrote about what probably does lead those women to that certain situation, so I felt really passionate about that. So I'm really glad that it's here again for maybe people who haven't read it. Yeah.
So I think you introduced us beautifully to the collection. Can I ask you to read?
Oh, yes. Okay. So Fiona, besides calling me middle-aged, said there was a lot of food in here, and so I'm going to read a bit about food.
Oh, I forgot to ask that question because there's so much about food, like almost all of the stories, whether it's Gauguin and being starving and eating salted beef, which sounds hilarious.
It was my fasting day.
But then also all these beautiful, evocative scenes of food being cooked, thought about, made, eaten. So before you read, why food? What does food say to you and the reader?
Do you know what I like food? I like to write about food anyway, because a lot of my first fiction, set in Indonesia or, Eurasians from Indonesia, food, I know there's a lot of beautiful food culturally, but Indonesians love their food. Is that right? We love our food, don't we? And it's just really, and it's a way into the characters, I think, through their food. Like the first thing an Indonesian will say to you when you go over to their place or something is like, I can't eat something. It's just sort of, I'm getting nothing over here from the bloody peanut gallery. I'm giving the questions, they're just looking at me. And I just thought it was a great way into those characters. And then, when I was like this book cover, when I was first I really liked. So we had a few from this wonderful artist, Chong, and I was like, I really like the bananas. She goes, I'm not doing bananas. I'm like, no, hear me out. And I had all these reasons for the bananas, sorry, Chris, I'm going to have a time.
No, you're right.
You know, like, first of all, there's that, you know, where they call, like, Chinese people who are brought up in the West, they're called bananas because they're yellow on the outside of the one and stuff. And then these ones are the Javanese bananas, and he called the painting Post Gauguin, which like caught my eye as well because the Gauguin story. And also then I Googled, like I word counted in my book, and there's something like 17 bananas. So somewhere I've got lots of bananas in here as well. I think also because a couple of the stories are set in North Queensland, and you know, banana farmers, the Chinese and that sort of thing. So lots of bananas. And I just love food. And in my writers group, we used to always, you know, I'd go there and I don't know what to write about. What do I write about here, or how do I get on? And Laura never would be like, write about food or sex, food or sex. So that's what I turned to, you know, food or sex. Because the food wins, sorry.
The book just kind of almost oozes with scents and the smell of spices and the flavours of those foods.
Oh, yes, thank you. Well, this one. Okay, it's called Chintaku, which is I love you, and she's cooking gulai kambing. And these fellows over here will probably tell me she's doing it wrong. The oil pops in the pan, bites the skin at the base of her thumb as she thinks of Jacob, the first time she met him in her stepfather's sitting room, surrounded by porcelain vases, eggshell white and blue. He stood across from her on the Persian carpet. His eyes took her in, this rich girl who's being tossed to the poorest fishing family of the village, all because her mother had been foolish enough to follow the waves that beckoned to her from the sea. He murmured her name, Maya, and even then, right then, she wanted to rest her face against his chest, inhale the scent of his skin that was as glossy and dark as tamarind. But that was a long time ago now, in another land. Later, when she moved to Australia, she taught her language at a university, a mere assistant to the lecturer, Professor Malcolm. Her students would never have imagined their neat little Bahasa student, tutor, Bu Lung Kun, in her button-up blouse and pleated skirt, had once been a lowly fisherman's wife who lived in a hut, who dried and salted sardines until the pungent flesh crumbled in her fingers. After scooping garlic into the oil, Mayo makes her way into the lounge room and opens the mahogany display cabinet, the one with the heavy lead-like glass. From it, she takes out a pink dessert bowl in which are nestled 5 gleaming shells, betrothal gifts from Jacob, left by that ebony tree in the garden each morning leading up to their wedding. As she lifts them out, the shells clack against each other, pressing the cowrie shell to her ear. She closes her eyes, and for a moment she can hear their beach, their waves, the whistles and the coo, coo, coo of the birds. She can smell the brine, the seawater fug. She runs her fingertips over the metallic peacock swirl on the underside of an oyster shell, while her gaze takes in the milky gleam of the clam. Her favourite is the mother of pearl on the mussel shell. She brings it to her mouth, and the tip of her tongue searches out anything, a granule of sand, a hint of salt in the shell scalloping, but there's nothing left. She smells burning, the garlic. She hurries back to the kitchen and whisks the pot from the stove top. The slices of garlic, charred so that they look like wood chips, still bubble in the oil. That's okay though, isn't it? Staring at the garlic for a moment longer, she shakes her head. No, she'll start again. It has to be just right. While the fresh garlic cooks, Maya glances out the kitchen window, the foggy glass a barrier between the warmth inside and the damp chill. The eucalypts in the backyard are paler than the teak trees of her childhood. Their leaves are dry, crackle between her fingertips, but she likes the little plants, the ones called pig face. What a funny name to call a flower with such friendly petals. But that's definitely what Pat had called them when she popped in from next door to welcome Maya to the street. Placing shallots into the mortar with the chilies, ginger and candle nuts, Maya grinds and pushes until the spice are pulpy and her hand cramped because grandmother had croaked at their wedding. And then, leaning in close to Maya, you'll be the mortar. Maya could smell the cardamom on the old woman's breath from the bigger nut she chewed, the red cardamom wrapped in serried leaf.
Oh, wonderful.
I think this is all a sense of the power of the emotion, the evocative feelings. Thank you. So great. I think that is time for us now to clap very loudly for Mirandi.
Fiona Stager, of course. Question, if that's all right with you, Mirandi. There's a question from Laura. From the book Dignity, can you talk about the hidden world that makes up this story and how you hit upon the main character?
Oh, thank you, Laura. So Dignity is about an Indonesian servant. She works overseas in, one of the Middle Eastern countries. What inspired that was actually our uncle, a friend of ours, Pepin, who works for Papa's brother in Indonesia. So when my kids were little, he had his grandson was born, and I knew a year or two later that the mum had to go to Dubai to work, even though she had this toddler, and she had to go on one of those 2 or 3 year, work visas, and of course at first she wasn't paid, and all these horrible things. And I did start to, and just as a mum with young kids, it's just horrifying anyway to have to think that you have to leave for 3 years anyway. Just because there was just simply not enough work in Indonesia for her in Java. And then of course I did my research and looked into the, terrible conditions for a lot of people who work, overseas. And that's where that story comes from. Purely, like I said, it came from a personal place originally and then sort of grew from there.
Thanks, Laura. Does anybody in the audience have a question for Mirandi? Yes. Yeah.
Pam,
I'd like to know what you read.
what do I read?
What have you been reading?
So at the moment I'm reading Galgot.
Galgot.
Yes.
Yeah. A lot.
Fiona loved it. And it won the Booker Prize. So that's it. And the book that I really loved, was that Maggie Shipstead Great Circle. Oh my God, it's amazing. I think that's really amazing. And it's sort of half historical, half set now, like an actress now, playing the part of a female pilot from the past, but it's from both their perspectives. Have you read it, Elka? No. Oh, it's brilliant. We'd love it. It's brilliant.
Do you have to read in the style of what you're writing as you're writing it? Because I know you're working on a book. Do you have to try and keep things in that style when you're
I have wondered about that. There's a lot of writers who don't like to read certain things while they're writing in case. I think what my style is what my style is. And I think all writers would agree that every time you write something, you think it's shit anyway, so it doesn't even matter. Would you agree? Like as you're writing it, usually you're just like, oh my God, this is rubbish.
No? Oh, yeah, your own work,
unless you're prissy and you know it's brilliant.
Your own work, yeah.
I'm talking about your own, my own.
Yeah. But I tend to want to read something that is reminiscent of what I'm writing.
Oh, absolutely. I do try that. I think, I made the mistake of reading Hamlet just before I sat down to start writing this, and I was like, I will never do anything good. So that's also a trap. But
just don't read Michael Ondate when you're writing.
Oh, I love him. No, I could never. Actually, I did for this pilot one I'm writing. I read, what's his name? That was a movie.
The English Patient.
English Patient. I read that. I was like, not that I can write down Dutch. I was like, this is, let's go here. I mean, it's
pretty beautiful. Other questions from the audience?
Maybe a final question can be, do you have a Zoom question?
No, I don't think so.
Okay. Final question. What are you working on? You said you were going to reveal.
This is where I was going to April Fool Aviva and Sales. We just spoken about aliens for that. But no, I'm writing one. It's set in Java just before the Japanese invade. So it's the last couple of months, and it's a Dutch pilot, and he is engaged to one woman, but he's actually in love with another one, and
so they've got to work out who's going to be sort of evacuated to Broome. So that's very, yes. First, before we do go, I do want to just say thank you to Avid and Chrissy and Fiona. Thank you so much for everything you do for all of us. And, you know, like even that first Zoom, I was telling somebody today, that first Zoom launch, we practiced it a few times. Remember? We practiced it a few times.
And we did, before that, we did our trial event with Cass Moriarty talking about
That's
supporting
right.
Australian
That's
writers.
right.
That was the first Zoom event that then has launched 2 years of continuous events.
They're
Yeah.
still up, those events are they're still up on our YouTube channel, and you can look back at Mirandi's event and at Cass's event, which was our first event, and we were so full of excitement and energy because this was the beginning of
we looked like
COVID.
20 years younger.
Yeah, we were 20 years
Oh
younger.
my God.
You know, COVID had just started, and we thought, okay, we can still do events, we can still do books, and
So positive.
and possibly our Zoom events got a little bit shabbier and shabbier as we all got
I did a
like 20
podcast
years
today
older.
and I was like, oh, my headphones didn't work. And she goes, no, I don't think anybody cares now. They get cat. So, but also I want to say thank you to UQP who are just so beautiful. Lou, oh my God, poor Lou. Sorry, email her. Lou. And Aviva, of course, who's just always just been just such a staunch supporter of my work. So I just really want to say thank you to Abbott and UQP. And thank you so much for coming out tonight. I know this is a really fraught week, and I got many texts today. I was really just like, oh no, I know who's going to be there. So I'm so thrilled you're here. Thank you very much.
So we will do the signing. We might let Miranda go through.
Yeah, we're going to let Mirandi go through to the very front of the shop. We'll do the signing in there. You get some messy. So if everyone can just wait as we take Mirandi through, and then we can go to the counter, grab the books and mop them. Okay, so
And if you're on Zoom and you've got personalised copies, give the shop a ring and sort that out. Yeah.
I'm just going to say goodbye to my dad quickly. I'm
sorry to pause everybody.
yeah, I'm going to be there. Yeah. May can walk you out the back way. Lovely to see you. Lovely to see
That was the luckiest one.
Yeah, sometimes I have my favorite if I start with. Like who's the day?
Yeah.
It's the best one. It's